Back to this week, I'm going to be discussing how is it that we can actually incorporate a variety of different strategies for students with disabilities, in particular in teaching math. Math is another very difficult subject for sometimes for students with disabilities, and students with disabilities and students with autism do require more of a systematic approach, of teaching math. They do like understanding, some of the rules and the process, ahead of time and modeling that information for them. So I'm just going to go over a few different things for this week that also are in the PowerPoint as well. Okay, so as far as teaching math, you want to make sure that there's an opportunity for review of the material and drill. So we call that spiral review. So I'm going to write that here. So spiral review, okay, has to do with, reviewing concepts, from time to time. A lot of times you see the math teachers sometimes that will do this. So you just have to make sure that the children are actually being able to go back to this material often. So maybe it could possibly be something on Friday where you review the material again, or maybe it's one day out of the week where you review the material that they learned throughout the week, or maybe it's in the beginning of the class where they do a few problems that they did from yesterday. So that's also known as spiral review. And so you can have spiral review within the week, within the month. You could have the whole idea of having certain concepts where you reteach those certain concepts in given months throughout the year, but it's very, very important that students receive that spiral review so that way they're prepared for the next year as well. Another concept that's also really important is, well, like I mentioned, review and drill. So having that drill practice for the students to go back and do some of those problems. But another one has to do with incremental rehearsals. So I'm going to write that here. So basically allowing increased time and to study a concept. So just basically giving students that opportunity, maybe you've taught them how to add fractions with like denominators at first, and then you master that concept, and then a few days later you do subtracting fractions with like denominators, and then a few days after that you might do adding fractions with unlike denominators. So you kind of build on the previous concept, and you constantly have practice, of those concepts, even from the first concept that you taught. So another strategy that we also use in teaching math is many Monic devices. So I'm going to write that here. Oops, sorry, to the end there. Okay, in teaching math. So these are basically like acronyms, I guess you could say, where the teacher remembers and the students kind of remember that if they have a math problem or a word problem, they can break down that problem using the mnemonic device or the acronym. Okay, so you might have, like, for example, PEMDAS. You might have heard that one. Or you might have heard cube. Or you might have heard, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Okay, so starting with PEMDAS, this, the P stands for parentheses. The E stands for exponent. Oops. The M stands for multiplication. And I'm just putting a little space in between so that way you can see what it really stands for. The D stands for division, and this one I actually like to put it up here, so we can put and division, D for division. And then the A stands for addition, and the S stands for subtraction. All right, so you can teach students either PEMDAS, or you can teach them, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, for order of operations. This one is very, very helpful. And you can even have the students write it down, every time that they're going to do a problem of order of operations, to write down PEMDAS on the side of their paper, so that way they can remember how to do it. And then every time that they complete a step, they can check. So if they finish the part with the parentheses, then they put a check mark there. If they finish the part with multiplication, then they put a check mark there. So that way it helps keep them in order and track. Another one that I wanted to also share that I also used in the classroom was one known as Cube, and this was more for solving word problems. So the C was to circle. I use that one to circle keywords, or phrases. If it says more than, then that means, addition, those kinds of things. The U meant to underline. So the operation, or what it's asking you to actually do. And then the B was to box, anything that was important. So box any important words or phrases. And then the E was to eliminate any parts that were not necessary. Okay, so this is known as the cube method. So you can maybe put this in a poster in your classroom, and then, but the key part is that you have your students practice this strategy in solving word problems. So again, the C stands for circling key vocabulary words. The U stands for underlining, trying to identify the operation. The B stands for box. So you're trying to box important words that are in that word problem. And then the E stands for eliminating. So you're eliminating parts that are really unnecessary. So those are just some three quick methods. Again, you can use many Monic devices, and within many Monic devices there's a variety of them. You can even create your own as well. And that's actually what I used to do as well. Incremental rehearsal strategies, spiral review, drill and repeat and practice. All of those things are very, very important in teaching math, and especially in teaching word problems. I do want to mention, going back, that it's very important that you understand your instructional setting of where you're actually, as far as like the type of students that you have. Every class is different, every school year is different. Sometimes you might have students that are a little bit more advanced. Sometimes you might have students that just need that guided practice more. So you have to kind of gauge it from there, and give students problems maybe with smaller numbers. Those kinds of things always help. Just so that way they can experience some success when you're doing either your warm-ups, or you're reviewing the math work from their general education classroom, or you're actually teaching the lesson if you're in an SDC setting. So keep that in mind to understand, your overall instructional level, of students. If you have an instructional assistant in the class, that is also very helpful as well. You can do some small groups and reteaching concepts, small group interventions. That's another strategy as well for students that maybe didn't understand a concept. So that's very important as well. You also want to understand the activities in a lesson. So if certain activities you understand that maybe won't be very helpful for your students, then maybe you can alter that activity. So for example, in a class I used to teach students with emotional disturbances, I knew that they didn't do a really good job in groups, to be honest. And so what I did was I altered part of the lesson, and so I just had them share with their partner that was sitting right next to them. So just making those types of changes, so you have to really understand the instructional level of your students, their behavioral needs, their social needs, and then just understand your overall setting and your overall classroom environment, and tailoring your lesson or your instruction to those needs. So again, there's many different ways, to teach math. You can use the regular process, of good teaching, which involves, direct instruction, and where you're actually teaching the student the content. You can also use guided practice as well, and then independent practice. So those are the three prongs of good teaching. So it's the I do, so you're teaching them the part. The you do, that means the we do it together. And then there's the you do part, which is the independent practice. You can also do other different types of strategies as well, like from many Monic devices to spiral review to incremental rehearsal, uh, also even to stories as well. So teaching students stories is another good strategy.